Ready?
Yeah, it must have been not. How did you deal with that? I mean, we're going to start tonight, but quickly, I mean, that must have been difficult to deal with in the Siddur itself. How you were going to
Yeah.
do.
The truth is, in my Siddur, my goal was to bring different minhagim, like all to give place to each minhag, but in the inside of the Siddur, meaning the main text is usually following the Rabbanut Harashit in terms of the new minhagim, like Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaShoah, Yom HaAtzmaut.
Right. So you followed the way that the Rabbanut Harashit.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. All right. Well, with your permission, Rav, we're going to begin. I'm going to say on the back of that, you mentioned how your attempt was to, in the Sephardi Siddur, I'm going to show us a picture of the miniature version of it. This is the Siddur that Rabbi Hanan was responsible for, Ke'minhag HaSfaradim. And I have written publicly, and I've said publicly, that it is the best, by far, example of a Siddur that I have ever seen that includes all of the minhagim of the Bnei Sfarad in it. And not only does it include the minhagim, it has a phenomenal compendium of the halachot, all that Rabbi Hanan Benayahu was responsible for. And that was my first real introduction to him. When I saw the Siddur, I just thought that it was so wonderful and so phenomenal. That I had to get to know him. So when I first moved to London, I had some interaction and discussion with him. It's always been a tremendous honor to be able to speak with you, Rav. And a tremendous
likewise. The honor is all mine.
Thank you. We have a tremendous Hazak Baruch on that work. It's a joy not only to pray from that Siddur, but also to look at that Siddur and to use it as a reference. I think everybody should have it on their shelf. But so Rabbi Hanan worked for Koren, and he was in charge and responsible for that project, and also Mahzorim, if I'm not mistaken, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Yes. And currently, Rabbi Hanan is involved in a very interesting and exciting project that also is very much in tandem with what it is that the Habura is doing, called Kehilot Israel Institute, in which the plan is for this to be a museum in which one can experience on various levels one's own heritage, or the heritage and minhagim and masoret of other kehilot. So for Judaism in general, the element of masoret of Judaism in general, and the various kehilot in Israel. So it's a very exciting project. I want to also say that Rav Hanan, you're the only person that I know whose profile picture on WhatsApp is my predecessor, Hacham Rafael Meldola. I don't know what that's about, but I like it.
Okay.
So in any case, without further ado, I'm going to give the stage over to Rav Hanan. It's wonderful to see everyone here tonight. Kol hakavod for being here, and I think that you'll enjoy a great deal. B'chavod, Rav Hanan Benayahu.
B'simcha rabba. So first of all, good afternoon, evening, night. I don't know, people are here from what I understand, from all over. So kodem kol erev tov and chag atzmaut sameach. The topic that Rabbi Dweck asked me to speak tonight about was, tonight, I'm saying tonight because I'm in Israel, was the whole evolution of the Sephardi Siddur, which is quite a large thing to sum up in one session, but we'll try our best. And let me start first with a little bit of introduction. What is a Siddur? Why do we have a Siddur? So if we look in the Mekorot, in the sources, basically in the Mishnah and Talmud, we have bits and pieces. In the Tosefta, we have bits and pieces. In the Midrashim, bits and pieces of different brachot, different minhagim, different rituals. But there's now something that is like a codex that will gather everything from that time, from the time of the Amoraim, even, let's say, that gathers, or even from the Sevoraim, that gathers all this material into one coherent book that has a chapter for everything and tells us what to do from getting up till getting to sleep, and all the different filot, all the different rituals we have to do. The evaluation of the Siddur is basically started, what we call Siddur today, started in the times of Rav Natrunai Gaon from Geonei Bavel, and then further with Rav Saadia Gaon and Rav Amram Gaon, which they compiled these customs, these minagim, these dinim of, and excuse me for my Hebrew, from time to time I'll switch to Hebrew when I can't find the correct term in English. So they compiled the Siddur in order, as a response for questions from different communities that they want to be taught. The Siddur, the order of tefillot, how they should pray, what they should pray, what brachot should they say, etc. And Rav Nathanael Gaon started, and on most of the old Siddurim, starting with the list of what is the brachot that you're supposed to say, starting from night till morning before you go to sleep, what do you say, and then Birkot HaShachar, etc., etc. If one wants to really fathom what is a Siddur and what a Siddur used to be many years ago, before we had the different Nusachim, you should look in Siddur of Saadia Gaon. Siddur of Saadia Gaon was written in Arabic with the all the liturgy in Hebrew, but all the directions and all the explanations are in Arabic. And it gives you a very clear view of what a Siddur was. There is some things that are chova, what you should say, what you must say as a Jew every morning, the Birkot HaShachar, different Birkot HaShachar, Kriyat Shema, Tfilat Shmona Esrei, etc., and the different tefillot for Shabbatot, for Chagim, etc. And also for different occasions, if for Chatuna or Brit Milah or Pidyon Ben, etc., etc. Okay, now, so that's put aside, and then in the times of the Geonim, we already have some type of compiled Siddurim. There's a Siddur of Saadia Gaon, Siddur of Amram Gaon. So that's one aspect of the Siddur, which is basically what we call Nusach HaKeva. The main text, the thing that doesn't change, that has a very specific order for Shabbat, for Yom Tov, for Chol. But then, if we can say parallel to that, we have to. There is another aspect of the whole Siddur, which is the different piyutim, the different add-ons to the Siddur that are supposed to elaborate the tefillah, to make it special. Moshe Amru b'Mishnah, Kol ha'oseh tefilato keva en tefilato tachanunim. The idea, the concept behind the piyut is the idea, the notion of you have to every time say something new, something relevant to the specific Shabbat, for the specific Chag, something that is written in a certain congregation by certain poets, and so that's another something that there's a whole evolution of the Siddur, is what we add onto the Siddur, the different piyutim and the different liturgy that is not a part of the Tfilat Keva, Tfilat Chova, but add-ons. I will put in as a footnote here that for centuries, for many centuries, the piyutim became an integral part of the Siddur. Meaning to say, when you said Amidah, in not just what we say today in Yom Kippur, that there's a little bit Seder Kedusha, but every Shabbat, every Chag, every Moed, the Amidah would have different parts for each bracha that was a piyut. That was a piyut. If Rabbi Dweck, probably in your congregation, still in Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach, or in Shmini Atzeret, when you say Tikkun HaGeshem, Tikkun HaTal, it's collaborated with the actual Chazarat HaShatz. Am I correct?
Absolutely, Ken.
Again, that each paragraph is intertwined with the Lashon Bracha. And this is a topic that I think is most fascinating, but we won't be able to speak about it tonight, because this is really Kovea Bracha le'atzmo mamash. Kol ha'machlokot, all the different really pulmusim and machlokot that went over the question whether you can say piyutim in the tefillah or not piyutim in the tefillah, There's from the Rambam, Rabbi Meir Halevi Abul Afia, Ramban. There's many shitot and many aspects to that, and it's really a kovea bracha latzmo. I would more emphasize tonight. We'll speak about the evaluation, the evolution of the Sephardi Siddur. So as I said before, the Sidurim were basically born from our later Sidurim are born from these Sidurei HaGeonim, especially Sidur of Amram and especially Sidur of Saadia Gaon, that really had a very wide tfutza. What's the word for tfutza? Rabbi?
Distribution.
Distribution. Great word. Had a very wide distribution all over the globe. And then we can see that there is a few different, we call it avot nusach, basically nusachim that were, if we can separate the main nusachim, we have, and I'm talking on the medieval times, we're talking about nusach Ashkenaz, that is all around Germany area. We're talking about nusach Italia in Italy, or nusach Roma. We have nusach Sfarad, which is basically not one nusach, but three main nusachim, which is nusach Catalonia, nusach Aragon, and nusach Castilla. Different parts before Spain became one state, was divided to different kingdom, or I don't know how to say it in English, but different parts. Spain wasn't one state. We have Nusach Romania, which is more Byzantine Nusach, and we have the Nusach Mustarabim, which was basically the old custom of the Middle East, which and including all the Sham, Syria, Iraq, even till Yemen, all that, Persia, they had one nusach. It's called nusach Mustarabim. So how come today what we call nusach Sfaradim, we see all the Mizrahi people, Syrians, Baghdadi, Tunisians, north, east and west, and different Sfaradim, and there's Keilo Edot HaMizrach. How come we're called Nusach HaSfaradim if we're not from Spain? How come our Nusach was adopted the name Nusach HaSfaradim? So the historical story here is very interesting, because once the Jews were expelled from Spain, the biggest Chachamim, from the times of the Rishonim, Mamash, Spain was a home for Gdolei Israel, Gdolei HaGdolim shel Gdolei Israel, meaning talking Ramban, Ritva, Rashba, and their descendants, and till Abarbanel, Rabbi Yitzchak Arama, etc., that lived in Spain right before the expulsion from Spain. The mass of the Jews that came out of Spain, and they were very learned, their Chachamim, and the masses of people, number-wise, that came to the different communities, different places, either in what became the Ottoman Empire, and the Middle East. If we're talking about Syria, we're talking about Baghdad. If we're talking about North Africa, so those traditions was both quality and quantity of people that came to these places with their own customs. So in some of the communities, these customs were right away, in less than one generation, the local customs were almost nullified, nothing, almost were forgotten, and everybody adopted the Sephardi Nusach. And now when I'm saying Sephardi Nusach, we have to remember that we have three main branches in the Sephardi Nusach: the Catalonia, the Aragonia, and the Castilla. Now, one place that basically the Nusach of the wasn't adopted right away and took a few centuries, was in, I wouldn't say a few centuries, more than 1 century, is in Syria, in Aram Tzoba, in Halab. And this is, if you all see it, this is Mahzor Aram Tzoba. This is a project we did years ago of, I'm just showing a facsimile edition of the Mahzor, of the Nusach of Aram Tzoba. So the Nusach of Aram Tzoba, which is basically the Nusach of the Jews in the Middle East, when the Spanish congregations came after the expulsion from Spain to the Middle East, in some of the communities there was a strong community with a strong identity, self-identity, that they did not want to listen to the Sephardi Chachamim or the Sephardi traditions. They had their own traditions. So for more than 100 years, I think closer to 200 years after the Jews from the descendants of the people of the expulsion from Spain came to the Middle East, there were basically 2 minhagim there. There was minhag Sfaradim of the new settlers, and there was minhag Mustarbim, minhag Aram Tzoba. If we look at these 2 minhagim, we'll see that it's very different. The customs of the Jews in the Middle East were very different than the Sephardi customs. And most of them, after, as I said, after 100 or 150 years, that continued as the Mustarbim only in Syria. Only in Syria, only in the Halab, they did not surrender to the Sephardi customs for a long time. And they had the Mustarbi Nusach, which was a special Nusach, but then in the end of the day, the Sephardi Nusach took over. Now, so if we have in the Jewish world, and I'm talking on what we call today the Sephardi Jews, meaning to say the people from North Africa, from the Middle East, in a certain aspect also Yemen. We see that there is a nusach that is not so different to each other, not so different, and we see another thing that is basically following one string from the 3 different customs of Spain. It follows the Castilla custom, which was a custom with very, very few piyutim, and that's connected to what I said before. The whole question whether to integrate piyutim into the tefillah in every Shabbat, in every Chag, or to put the piyutim away. And basically what happened in most of the congregations, and I'll speak a little bit more about it a little bit later, that they moved the piyutim from being a part of the real Chazarat Hashatz of Birkot Kriyat Shema. They moved them to between after Tefillat, after Chazarat Hashatz, or some congregations before Birkot Kriyat Shema, but left them out of the main part of the tefillah. So if we look now on the Sephardi Siddur and the Sephardi customs in the 16th century, we'll see that from these different strings of the Spanish customs of Catalonia, Aragonia, Castilla, there's also the right of the Jews from Portugal, Minhag Lisbon, and there's other small congregation strings. So in Turkey, after the expulsion from Spain, there were 36 different congregations. 36 different congregations that if you would have been there, you basically would use a different siddur for each Bet Knesset. Not in a way that you wouldn't be able to understand what's happening, or it's a totally different nusach, but many words here different piyutim, different inserts, different amounts of kaddish, etc., different words, a little bit different words in certain brachot. For instance, in Minhag Catalonia, ברכת אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש וקדושים בכל יום ילכו סלע, started with לדור ודור אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש וקדושים בכל יום ילכו סלע. And that's one example that you would see different versions of the brachot. Now, what made this melting pot much quicker, much
For the Rav.
And baya.
So the question was the 16th century and streamlining everything, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So in the 16th century, something very important happens, is that printing press becomes very, very popular. And the printing press has a very vast influence of the Nusachet Tfilot. Because once you print, the printing press doesn't print, individual for a community of 30 or 40 people. And what I mean by that is that communities had to combine together towards one nusach, or towards few different options as opposed to many options. And for instance, there was a community, there's still a community, descendants of it, that there's one community in the Jewish world, or maybe two communities. It's basically it's three communities in France that is called one minhag apam, which is till today it was never printed, their minhag, because it was such a small congregation, and we have so many manuscripts of that minhag because they did not accept the other minhagim. They kept their own special tradition, which is not so different. It's a different mixture, a different cocktail, a few words different here, a few words different there, maybe some other piyutim, but really not such a tremendous difference in the other congregation, let's say like in Karpatans and everything. So they're the only congregation that left it on manuscript. So, as I said, in the 16th centuries, there is the big invention of the printing press is becoming very popular, and that has a vast effect on how the nusach started to unify together. Even though said that those three nusachim, all three of them were printed in the beginning. Meaning to say both Minhag Catalonia, Minhag Aragonia, Minhag Castilla, Minhag Aramtsova, and Minhag Romania, and Minhag Italia, Minhag Ashkenaz. They all were printed in the beginning of the 16th century, and not the very little communities. And also, sorry, the Portuguese Minhag from Portugal, Lisbon, Minhag Lisbon was also printed in Lisbon right before the Girush. The big difference on Minhag, the prayer book of Minhag Catalonia and Minhag Aragonia was it was printed just the Mahzorim for Yamim Noraim, just for Yamim Noraim, as opposed to Minhag Castilla, which was very dull in terms of the piyutim, very, very few piyutim. But basically, it's what we pick up today. Most of the Sephardim we kept the Minhag Castilla of very few piyutim, and that's what was printed. Because there's also so few piyutim, it was printed. The whole Siddur was printed, so that has another effect. And another thing that happens basically maybe a generation later is the whole growth of the Torah Kabbalah in Sfat. And Torah Kabbalah in the next few centuries has a very big effect on the Minhag Sephardim. And that's where the real differences between the different branches of the Sephardi Minhag till this very day is basically the influence of the Mekubalim. So we can see that from the 16th century, the Sidurim were printed first in Spain, then in Venice, which was the New York of the 16th, 17th century, and really as a side note, I will say that from Venice, we owe so much. The Judaism, Jewish culture owes so much for these printing press that flourished in the 16th and the 17th century in Venice. It's unbelievable how much of our heritage was kept thanks to those printing press and thanks for the thirst of the Jews to buy these books. Really, hundreds and hundreds of different books and editions and copies were printed. You can see that the amount of books that were printed, if you want to fathom the how many books were printed, you can see that today, if you go to an auction house, basically a book that was printed in the 16th century in Venice is around $300 to $500. That means it's not so rare even today. That means that they printed so many books, and it's sometimes mind-boggling, even on esoteric stuff, even things you say, how many people could even learn this thing, read this Hebrew, read this little Rashi letters back in the 16th century, when education wasn't so easy always, and there were so many other problems that people had to go through. But you see that's as a side note, as I said, it's just gives you a little bit of glimpse. What is Am HaSefer? It's not Am HaSefer. It's not just the Tanakh. It's that our whole heritage and our whole identity is based on the letters, on the words, on the books, it's an intellectual culture. And we don't have so much art. You can see the Israel Museum and other places. You can see some beautiful Judaica. But if you compare it to the Goyim, in any culture, we're very small. It's just nice artifacts, the Beit Knesset, maybe some illuminated manuscript. Maybe they're very beautiful, but when you think about the quantity and even the quality as opposed to what we have in the written word, in the written books, then you see that really the Jewish heritage is an intellectual, it's an intellectual culture completely. Okay, so putting that aside, now I lost my thread of thought. I was before that I was speaking of the different minhagim and
we're going to talk about the Mekubalim, I think.
Good. So the Torah Sod in Sfat started to really become big. Oh, I remember now. I was talking about the prayer books that were printed in Venice. Then afterwards, during the late 17th, 18th century, the center of printing press leaves Venice and leaves another center that we had in Constantinople, in Kushta, in Turkey. It moves to the center of printing press, becomes Amsterdam. During especially the 18th century, most of the books are being printed there. And then we have another type of Sidurim. And in Amsterdam, something very interesting is happening. There's two types of Sidurim. There's one type of Sidurim that I call it export Sidurim. You see, they're much bigger. They have different variations. And there is the smaller Sidur, much thinner, that is for local needs. The Spanish and Portuguese custom by Rodriguez Mendez, Jacob de Silva Mendez, the printers, the Magihim that printed those books, as opposed to the different books that were printed, different prayer books that were printed by in the printing press of popes and other people that basically send it to all the different Sephardi Jewish communities. After Amsterdam, we have another station in Livorno, and in Livorno, really, I think the big change happened, because by the time it was printed in Livorno, we're talking about the time of already the Chida is alive, in that time, and the customs of the Mekubalim became very, 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 very well adjusted and adopted by many communities, and you see that there is so much more material in the Sidurim, all different Yeratzon and Leshem Yehud and different customs that has to do with Kabbalah, a lot of things in Aramaic, a lot of taking away more even pieces of the piyutim out of the tefillah, out of like we said before, the Hazarat Hashatz for Tfilat Tal, Tfilat Geshem, and moved to the side, moved to after Hazarat Hashatz, etc. And also some things, different versions of different tefillot. Maybe the most Achi Bolet is Baruch She'amar. If you go to see, if you pray with maybe very few Moroccan and North African communities, but definitely all these Spanish Portuguese communities, you see the Baruch She'amar, and those communities is much longer. And if there's Shabbat or Chagim, you add the different nusachim into that Baruch She'amar. And in the other communities, and the other Mizrahi communities, it's a very specific nusach of 87 words in Baruch She'amar, and there's a whole story around that. And maybe I will use that story of Baruch She'amar to basically give a little bit of a taste of what is really the difference between the different communities. But before that, after I said about the Livorno Sidurim, we have also the Sidurim from the Middle East, especially we're talking after the Hashpa'ah of the Ben Ishchai. I'm talking about really recent years that the halachot and the customs of the Ben Ishchai went very, very strongly into the Sidurim. And in the beginning of the state of Israel, basically that was the Sidur. Sidur shel Tfilat Yesharim and Tfilat HaChodesh, but not the original ones from Livorno, but the ones that were adjusted to keep the customs of and the halachot of the Ben Ishchai. Okay, so I would like to make a quick summary of what we said, and to give and to see it now a little bit through the sources of our different chachamim in different stages. So I said I'll take Baruch She'amar as an example. And if we go to the Sidurei Geonim, we'll see that Baruch She'amar, by the way, is a bracha that is not mentioned in the Talmud at all. Rabbi, how many minutes do we have still? Just want to make...
About 20 minutes, but the floor is yours, so no rush.
Okay, okay. So Baruch She'amar is a bracha that was not mentioned was not mentioned at all, not in the Mishnah, and definitely not in the Talmud, and not in other sources. The first time we're seeing it in a what we call Sidur is Sidur Rab Saadia Gaon, but he himself did not know how to eat this. Where was it born, really, Baruch She'amar? So he says that, I'm reading it in Hebrew. He wrote it in Arabic. I'm reading the translation. והתנדבה אומתנו לקרוא מזמורים מספר תשבחות הקדוש ברוך הוא, ולפניהם ואחריהם שתי ברכות. ותקנה לעשות כך, אחרי שהמאמין מברך על כל המקרים הקוראים אותו מראשית יקיצתו, עד זמן התפילה, כמו שאבאר לך אחר כך בפרק נפרד מן התפילות. ואחר כך אומר ברכת הפתיחה, ברוך אתה השם ככל העם, האל הרחמן הגדול, הקדוש, המעולה בפי עמו, וכו' וכו'. And he says, Baruch She'amar v'haya olam, in a different nusach that is very very similar to the Portuguese nusach. That what they Baruch ma'avir afela u'mevi ora, Baruch she'en lefanav lo avla ve'lo shochad ve'lo mikach shochad ve'lo maso panim v'chule v'chule v'chule. But we see already that the Rav Saadia Gaon says our nation had volunteered to say these different shvachot to the Kadosh Baruch Hu between the time that we wake up in the morning till the time we have to say Kriyat Shema. In the Torah, in the Gemara, we just know about Psukei de Zimra. We have no recollection of any bracha before that or after that. But we take this bracha, even though that it's not really a part of the original tefillah in the time of the Mishnah or the Gemara. Still, this is a nusach that has evolution in different Sephardi. I'm putting aside the Ashkenazi and Italian communities, even the Romagnol, the Byzantine Jews, I'm putting aside. and it has already few versions of the nusach, and that's in the time of the Rishonim. In the time of the Tur, in the end of the time of the Rishonim, already we see that these versions of Tefillah is very, some people struggle that they will be canonized in a way that you don't change even one word. And that's the way that the Baal HaTurim writes in the Tur, in Siman Nun Aleph, in Tur Orach Chaim. He writes like that. ברוך שאמר צריך לאומרו בניגון ובנעימה כי הוא שיר נאה ונחמד למעלה. וכתב בספר איכלות שיש פה פז תיבות, 87 words. וסימן ראשו כתם פז וכן נוסח אשכנזים, ונתקנה ברכה זו משום דאיתא בכל פרקי כל קודש, כל האומר תהילה לדוד בכל יום, and then he speaks about the פסוקי דזמרה, ולכן תקנו לאומרם קודם תפילה וקבעו ברכה זו לפניהם, אחת לפניהם, ברוך שאמר, אחת לפני אחריהם, Ishtabach. So the two says that it has to be Peizayin Tevot. That's what it says in Safrut Echalot, which is a very, very old Kabbalistic writings, meaning to say on the Safrut Asod Akduma. It's I don't know when it's exactly, but the roots of it is already in the times of the Mishnah, but as I said, until the time of the Geonim, we have no recollection from where exactly that bracha came. And the Abu Draham says about the Timtzak yesh bebracha zo remez le'asara ma'amarot, and gives a whole different explanation about what is in Baruch She'amar. And afterwards he says that and then he gets to a different number of words in Baruch She'amar, and he gives his own explanation. But where do we see that the whole thing comes to a boiling point with the different nuschaot? When it comes to Shmona Esrei, exactly because the old Hasidei Ashkenaz, from one of the descendants of Baalei Tosafot, they really, Rabbi Yehuda Hasid and others, really counted the different words in the tefillah. According to the Sephardi tradition, they did not agree to that system. Abu Draham writes, "Yesh anashim shemanu tevot sheyesh bechol bracha ubracha mishmona esrei, ve'eviu psukim al kol bracha ubracha meinyana, she'olim tevot keminyan tevot habracha." Meaning to say, there's some people that really counted every letter, every word in the tefillah. They brought some proof from different psukim that has to be the same amounts of words, like the same amount of words that there's in a certain pasuk. And he says, the Abu Draham, "V'chen asiti ani barishona minyan kazeh." In the beginning, I also started, when I did my own tefillah, or maybe my own commentary, I did the same thing, started to count. ואחר כך נראה לי שאין לו יסוד ולא שורש. Has no root to this custom, כי לא תמצא מקום בעולם שאומר 18 בעניין אחד תיבה תיבה, אלא יש מוסיפים ויש גורים. You won't find one place in the world that they're saying the same nusach exactly. Some people add some words, some people use different words. ואם כן המניין הזה אינו מועיל אלא למי שעשאו לא לזולתו. It only helps to the specific person or the specific community that counted these words for some reason for their own benefit. But it's not something that we can take in other communities to put in our to use it as a system to check the tefillah. Later on, with as I said, I wanted to give the example of Baruch She'amar also from what the Mekubalim said. And in the Mekubalim, there was a big milchama to change in the Sephardi communities the nusach of Baruch She'amar to be the Paz Tevot, the 87 words in Baruch She'amar, and not to use the long Baruch She'amar. And that debate started very early, already in the times of Rabbi Yosef Karo, already the times of the Bet Yosef and the Shulchan Aruch. Rabbi Levi ben Chaviv, which was a rabbi that sat in Jerusalem, was one also a descendant of one of the Chachamim that went from left Portugal. Rabbi Yaakov ben Chaviv, Baal En Yaakov, was a very big rabbi and had some big debates with Maran Rabbi Yosef Karo. And somebody is asking him, what should I do with Baruch She'amar? He says, ועל אשר כתבת שנמצא ביניכם מי שאומר שאין לומר בברוך שאמר ברוך הוא, והפריז, because that's an additional two words, והפריז עוד על המידה לומר שכל מי שאומר אותו שחייב מיתה. Meaning to say, if you add these so he says to him, he answers this, if you listen to what I'm telling you, אל תיתן לבך לכל אשר יאמרו אנשים כאלו, כי זה דרכם להראות עצמם בעיני ההמון, אומרים דברים מבהילים בלי דעת ובלי תבונה, ואתה לא תובע להם ולא תשמע להם לשנות דבר בתפילותיכם מסיבתם, וגם לא תתפעל מדיבורם. So the Ralbach answer him, if you listen to me, do not pay attention to these people, because that's that way they speak, especially in front of ignorant people. That's what I said. They want to show themselves very powerful. They want to be scary. They want to be maybe dominate their congregation. So they say something very extreme about this is against the tradition, and if you say that chayav mitah, זה ממש כאילו כמו חילול Shabbat or other things, is if you change the words in Baruch She'amar. So that even though the Ralbach said what he said, slowly but surely, when we come to the Sidurim of Livorno, already we don't have the long Baruch She'amar, we have the short Baruch She'amar and the long Baruch She'amar in small writings. Maybe I'll just put it in front of the screen. And in the beginning, it's, you see, the long Baruch She'amar is in the big writing, and this short Baruch She'amar, the short version, is in small writing. Maybe one generation after that, it's already changed. The long Baruch She'amar is in small writing and says that basically you shouldn't say this version, you should say the short version. And but if somebody says, then he could say if somebody is, that's his minhag and his custom and his community, then he continue to say the long version. However, 2 or 3 generations after that, that was already not even printed. The next example is the different dikduk, and I'll take the example again from Baruch She'amar. There is Baruch merachem al haaretz, Baruch merachem al haberiyot. So there's different in different customs, merachem al haberiyot, meaning to say not just the human race, but also on the animals. So that's different styles of nikud and dikduk that has in the sidurim. And the last part of what we have to take into account in the Sephardi Siddur is the different minhagim I mentioned a little bit before of the customs of let's say saying piyutim. That is the minhag of the piyutim. That was the one that caused the most big the clashes and the fights in the evolution of the Sephardi Siddur, but slowly yet surely there became 3 different customs. The Middle East Jews basically adopted the most mahmir approach of the Mekubalim and took away piyutim, went in Baruch She'amar and other parts of the Tefillah according to the Mekubalim. Then we have the North African Jewry that went in many ways and very interesting after the customs of Catalonia. And we have the Spanish Portuguese Jews that took over the Castilla minhag, but without many changes like the Middle East, the Mizrahi Jews put to the Siddur. Until this very day, we can see these three strings different Sephardi nusach that are still alive. Meaning to say the Middle East, the Mizrahi custom, the North African custom, and the Spanish Portuguese custom. Yeah, that's the background. And if there's any questions or want to hear some more details or more examples, bevakasha. Yes, please, Isaac.
So this is sort of general question for the process of putting together the Siddur. So it includes, it's really impressively thorough in terms of its different nuschaot, but there's always only so far you can go. Like the communities are so diverse. You say have communities from a particular country, but every individual city in that country actually has its own. And even within that, individual synagogues will. So how do you decide, when trying to be so comprehensive, but also it needing to be legible and usable, how do you decide where to draw the line?
Okay.
How fine to go, but how, yeah.
If you're asking specifically about what we did in the Kohen Siddur, when I was I was the editor of that Siddur, what were my rules to edit the Siddur? Is that the question? Yeah. Okay. So my work was very hard and very easy. It was very hard because I had to see all these different beautiful customs and ideas, and both in the poskim and both in the different nuschaot, in the old nuschaot, that unfortunately were not used anymore, and wasn't justified to put in the Siddur. Basically, mostly not in the main, not inside the Siddur, but maybe in the footnotes or on the back of the Siddur, where we spoke more about halachot and different customs. So that was very hard. The easy part was the thumb rule was that we followed the main nusach that is used today in the land of Israel, in Eretz Israel, which is the Edot HaMizrach, Keilot HaMizrach. However, whenever there was a full paragraph that was different, so I put them aside. For instance, as we said about Baruch She'amar, I will just put it on the screen. I'll show it in front of the screen. I put both of the nusachim. I put the long nusach, the short nusach that most of Sephardi Jews do today, and then in the other, in one page afterwards, I wrote the longer nusach, because that's a whole paragraph. That's what I did whenever there was, or for instance, in Tfilat, in Musaf Shel Shabbat. The rabbi obviously says LeMoshe Tzivita and not Tikanta Shabbat. In that particular nusach, I think that the rabbi is also knows that the Rambam had the nusach LeMoshe Tzivita. So for Syrian Jews has something with the Rambam. So
even Maran in the Bet Yosef, he says to say Moshe.
Nachon, Moshe Tzivita. So I put both of them. I said in some congregations this is recite and this is not recite. The idea was, I wanted my vision was, first of all, that every community will be able to use the Siddur, and everybody could find his nusach, especially. And again, when it's one word or different nikud, then I put it in the back of in the back of the Siddur, where we put all the different halachot. I mentioned them. I mentioned the different versions. I mentioned the different poskim that spoke about them, and and which communities do this minhag, that minhag, because I didn't want also the Siddur needs to be something.
Your Siddur Rav. That's why I'm saying your Siddur Rav. It's not just a Siddur to pray from, which it is, but it's a Siddur also as a place to learn. I mean, you've included everything. It's unbelievable, really. Maaseh Deoman. Unbelievable.
Thank you very much. So the idea was, and another thing that for me was bothering me. So my father, Alav Shalom, was a big Talmid Chacham, very big scholar, And he always used to love. He used, when we were children, he used to take us to the Italian shul, and the Rabbi Hanan ben Zakkai, and different places to see different traditions and everything. And my father, when he was when he was Hazan, he would say, "V'titen lanu Hashem lo et yom hamanoach hazeh ve'et yom," like in a Chag, instead of et yom haShabbat hazeh, et yom hamanoach hazeh. He used the Spanish Portuguese siddur. By the way, he brought to our community he met a Spanish Portuguese Chazan that was a Chazan in our community for years. Brought beautiful tunes of the Spanish Portuguese and was very happy adopted. Those tunes were very happily adopted to the community, and even sometimes the Chazan would say "Lemoshe tzivita," and people started to get it. Grew on them that you don't have to really always strictly follow a certain nusach, and that's the second thing I wanted to say here. As opposed to when people lived in a certain community that had certain tradition for many, many years, and changes were not understood. Some people did not understand the change, and also that was caused them to change things that they shouldn't be changing, and it disrupted the way that the tefillah was conducted and organized. So that was then. But today, when people, first of all, especially in the land in Medinat Israel, in the land of Israel, you daven shacharit. You see, I'm saying you daven. Yeah, you pray shacharit in this Bet Knesset, which is Ashkenaz. You pray Arvit in a Kurdi Bet Knesset. You pray mincha in, I don't know, in another Bet Knesset. People are much more realize and knows about the different minagim, and each one has his own siddur and davens his own nusach. It's not something that is so it is changing and makes a machloket or anything of the sort. And the other thing is that the Chida writes he says in a very clear way that Baruch, obviously, that whatever nusach you daven, you pray, you say the chova. Yeah, he's speaking about shmirat minhag avotav וכולי, אבל איזה נוסח שתתפלל, אתה יוצא ידי חובה. So I wanted people not to feel that if they say something, Yom HaManoach hazeh, as opposed to Yom HaShabbat hazeh, like they said something wrong. You know, that there's these synagogues that people, they're like shouting or something like that if somebody says a little bit different. And it was very important for me that people say that each minhag has a Beit Av. Each minhag has a Beit Av, because we really, all these traditions are beautiful in one hand, but in the other hand, ze lo halacha leMoshe miSinai, meaning to say there's a diversity, and especially now, I have an Ashkenazi wife. Rabbi Dweck is Syrian, that is, you're angry, aren't you? Rabbi Dweck converted to Spanish Portuguese, and trust me, I don't think he's going to go away from that. I think he's fully converted. It's very hard to change from Spanish Portuguese back to another nusach. But really, once you understand the different versions, and you know about them, and it's not, you're not making a decision that is la'akol halacha or la'akol minhag, that is still alive. You just, you personally saying one thing or the other thing is not. It's not a problem. And the third thing that it was important for me that people will really understand, some people that want to learn more and to understand the different halachot, or maybe whether it does with halacha or minhag or dikduk or all the other aspects of the tefillah, that they will have some place in the siddur, in the end of the siddur, that they can really find out about that particular part of the tefillah and read about it in a short paragraph that gives it also the sources. Like it's written in a very clear Hebrew, but with the sources that if you want to see mi omer Maran siman kacha vekacha, Rambam, Ralbach, Radbaz, whatever the sources that you can check for yourself. And this is just abbreviation and in a very short words, what's the different shitot about it. So I hope it answered your question, Isaac, because it's really, today it's much easier because there's not so many versions anymore, and it's more, there's few paragraphs that are different, but basically it's more or less of the same.
Natanel Jamal, you had a question.
You kind of touched on it a little bit, but I guess I can ask it. It really is for me and a friend doing some learning in the Siddur. So there's different nuschaot, and so the question was for the fourth beracha Amidah. It's maybe just a little tiny detail thing. What's the earliest reference to Chokhmah Bina V'Da'at as opposed to De'ah Bina V'Haskel?
או, יפה, שאלת שאלה מצוינת. ברוך השם, the truth is, אני זכיתי לגלות איפה היה השינוי. There was one of the big תלמידי חכמים in Jerusalem was called Rabbi Rafael Mordechai Malki. He was the father-in-law of the Pri Hadash. The father-in-law of Rabbi Chizkiah de Silva. Rabbi Dweck can speak a lot about him. He was a very revolutionary rabbi with very interesting ideas, very takif, very powerful. So we're talking about the 17th century in Jerusalem. So in one of his writings, he writes, וזה שאנו אומרים בברכת חונן הדת וחוננו מתך חוכמה בינה ודעת. So we're talking from around the 17th century. A researcher named Moshe Halamish printed an article called Birkat Chonen Hadat Venuschotea or something like that. He shows that there are tens and tens of different versions of these bracha from the times of the Geonim. Yesh Chokhmah ve'askel, De'ah ve'chokhmah, Chokhmah v'da'at, Da'at bina ve'chokhmah, Chokhmah De'ah bina ve'askel. There's a lot of versions of that bracha. I'm talking about, I think, around different 20 versions or 15 versions. Where do you place the Chokhmah bina? But Chokhmah bina v'da'at basically is a nusach that was adopted in Yerushalayim. The earliest mention of it is from the time of the father-in-law of the Pri Hadash, as I said. But then slowly and surely in the Kehilot HaMizrach, in the Middle East customs, it became, it has to do also with Kabbalah because of the Chokhmah, Bina, Vadat, of the Sfirot. And also there is another story that says, because Haskel, if you say it in Shin Yemanit, is like Lishkol, God forbid, to lose a child, Kmo Av Shakul. So there's also a little bit folklore about that thing, which doesn't make enough. It's not a strong enough nimuk of why not to use that word about Chonen Hadat. But if you want, I can even send you the PDF of that article about Chonen Hadat. I'll send it to the Rabbi. You can forward it to you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Any other questions for the Rav? Well, I have one question for the Rav.
Yeah.
You know, what you were saying about the Baruch Shamar and the Ishtabach, that's really not mentioned in the Talmud. And Harambam writes Tiknu Levarech.
Yeah.
So is he talking about the Geonim? Tiknu Levarech.
I think that I think he does. I think he's a little bit. I don't want to say mitchamek, but I don't know if he exactly knew who did the takana. Maybe it was a takana from Rabbanan Savorae. But right. You see, itnadva umatenu tiknu levarechu. That's not.
He left it. He didn't question that though, because there's other things that he says nahagu lomar, but tiknu levarech.
Ken.
Yeah, so very interesting.
So it's very Baruch She'amar is a very interesting because probably it was something that was very kadum from Safrut Echalot, that basically even after the time of the Gemara, already people said it, or maybe in the time of the Gemara, but it's just not mentioned in the Gemara.
It's true.
I wanted to add one more thing for what Netanel asked me about Chonen Hadat, is you can see that there's other brachot. I said about the Haskel, Lishkol, Chalila, but there's other Tikunei Lashon that because of the wording that has maybe another meaning or there's another remez, then things were omitted from the Siddur and changed with another word. The main thing, a very, very clear example for that is the Spanish Portuguese says anu, 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 like with the, not anachnu. Okay? No, modim, modim anachnu, we all say modim anachnu, but there's other mentions that the Sephardi, the Edot HaMizrach, Keilot HaMizrach says anachnu, and in the Spanish Portuguese they say anu. And because anu in the Bible, there's only one times anu, which is lashon evel. Ve'anu ve'avlu adayagim, says in Yeshayahu. So it's lashon evel aninut. So that's why they changed the whole Siddur from every place that you see anachnu used to be anu instead of besides modim. Another dugma, which is pretty funny, I think it's pretty funny, is Birkat Hamazon. If you look in a Spanish, Portuguese, or even a Moroccan or North African Siddur, you see the Birkat Hamazon starts with Hazanenu velo mima'asenu, amfarnesenu velo mitzkotenu, ama'adif tuvo alenu. Beautiful nusach Birkat Hamazon. So, what is the why is it different in the other Sephardi nusachim? And then there is a very interesting answer to that. It's already in the times of, if I'm not wrong, Rabbi Yosef Tuv Elem, in the times of Rashi, has a drasha why there is no pei sofit in Birkat Hamazon. Why there's no pei sofit Birkat Hamazon? To lelamedcha, to teach you that everybody that says the Birkat Hamazon bechavana, nitzal, me'af, shetzef, miketzef, for all the bad things that has a pei sofit in Hebrew, the pei sofit is usually used in words that are not so good. Af, shetzef, ketzef, and things like that is not a good sign or like a, so. If you do not say, it's a drasha, it's a nice drasha, but to take that drasha and to make it into a halacha, to basically change, to omit, because it says ma'adif tuvo alenu, I didn't understand why to take it off, and then I saw that this because of the ma'adif tuvo alenu. However, it's not that the other nusach was not, the other nusach, there's a whole, it has a betav, the other nusach is also a very kadum nusach, but the reason not to say, the reason that was omitted from some of the nusachim, of some of the sidurim, is because of that. And then it comes to the Ben Ish Chai, because if you see the old nusachim, even that they omitted that and went to the other nusach of Birkat Hamazon, in Ritzeh v'achalitzenu says, ve'af al pi she'achalnu v'shatinu, chorban betcha lo shachachnu. And then the Ben Ish Chai said, wait, there's another piece of it there. Ve'af al pi. It says, ve'hagam she'achalnu v'shatinu, chorban betcha lo shachachnu. It changed the nusach. So there's a lot of examples like that.
Aaron.
Thank you, Rav Benayahu. It's been really interesting. I think one other example that I've seen come up in terms of where did this come from is in the beginning of the Tefillah, before Kriyat Shema, at the very end of the first beracha, the line that we have in the Spanish Portuguese, Bikim me'orot mesameach olam asher bara. So you're the master choker. So I want to ask you, do you know where did this come from, and why do we in the Spanish Portuguese say it, and why do others?
It's a very nice question, because I was looking al ze mamash lama horidu et ze. I couldn't understand why they think they took it out. So אצל ראשוני האשכנז there's אור חדש על ציון תאיר ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו. Because, and then some of the Ashkenazim said you shouldn't say Rav Saadia Gaon said you shouldn't say Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir, because the light was, we are saying the blessing on the light itself and not on anything besides that. We're not talking about Yemot HaMashiach. We are saying the blessing of the light of the Me'orot. So, really, and in all the old nusachim, there is Beitkin Me'orot Mesameach Olamo Asher Bara, or Beitkin Me'orot Lesameach Olam, in all the different nusachim. So some so why do we have bichlal a tosefet like that? Now I'm talking about why we should have it. So because according to the Yerushalmi, en osim bracha pasuk, we do not say a bracha. We do not a pasuk cannot become a bracha. Because if it's לעושה הורים גדולים כי לעולם חסדו, ברוך אתה השם יוצר המאורות. So you're not making from a pasuk a bracha. So that was one. That was one of the ideas. But in the other hand, in the Orchot Chaim and other Rishonim said that this is not a good terutz. Why? Because if the pasuk is from the inyan of the bracha, from really the essence of the bracha, of what we're talking about, the topic of the bracha, then there's no problem. Another, I'm just looking in now that I didn't remember who said that. Yeah, sorry. In the name of Rabbi Meir Alevi Abulafia, and also in the name of Mahari Abu Av, it says, Lama lo lagid vitkin meorot mesameach olamo asher bara, because the meorot were, God created them to make light, not in order to rejoice people. That's not the idea. Vitkin meorot, זה לא לשמח עולמו אשר ברא, אלא להאיר על העולם, to make light in the world. And so there's an interesting nusach, which is both in the Romaniot and the Italian nusach that have also connection between them, that they say, ובחסדו נתנם להאיר על הארץ. להוצא הורים גדולים כי לעולם חסדו, ובחסדו נתנם להאיר על הארץ, ברוך אתה השם יוצר המאורות. So they going according, why did they have this why did they add that phrase? Is it in order not to make a bracha pasuk, probably? To go l'chumra on that part, that you shouldn't do a bracha pasuk, and to put a phrase that has to do in other words, not in the lashon hamikra, not as a pasuk, that has to do with that. But in the other hand, not to put the rejoicing of the world, not the sameach olam, ela bechasdo netanam la'aretz. In His grace, He gave it to put these huge light fixture to light up the world.
הבנתי. חזק בו, תודה.
Thank you. Harav, I'm gonna call it at 9:43. I'm going to say, first of all, I was so excited to and anticipating the shiur of yours, because these are not things that we get to hear every day. They're unique and special, and your mastery of them, and your wonderful excitement around them, which is so clear to see in how it is that you present it, is such a zechut for us to be able to hear.
Thank you.
And not only now that the excitement has
Baruch Hashem zikani to be able to sit on this and then to study this intensively for 2-3 years. So Chazdei Hashem, everybody else that could have. I got the zchut to sit and learn and do it, so
it's amazing. Baruch Hashem, thank you for taking the time to share it with us, and it's given me tremendous nachat to hear it. And I was so interested and excited always, as I am, from what it is that you teach. And I'm going to say that we're very much looking forward to this. We're very much looking forward to the series, which we have you down for, where you go into more detail on these inyanim for everybody who wants.
We'll have to make for that. We'll have to put some source sheets also. And,
and in the series under that time, it will be, this is mat'amet. This is just a taste. It's a taster.
It's a guideline of.
This is hors d'oeuvres. That's all. But Be'ezrat Hashem, Yeh Ratzon Kvod Harav shetafiz kol ma'anotecha achutza, yafizu kol ma'anotecha achutza.
ונזכה ללמוד תורה ביחד כולנו.
Yeh Ratzon, I look forward, and to all of the Chaverim who are present and who took the time tonight, I hope that you enjoyed as much as I did, and I look forward to being able to see you all on the time that we do it more in depth with the Rav, and Be'ezrat Hashem for more shiurim in the Habura. So Kvod Harav, thank you, and to all of you.
Thank you.
Yom Ha'atzmaut Sameach.
יום העצמאות שמח, ברכה מירושלים לכולם. All the best. Thank you very much. It was an honor for me. Thank you.
And for us.
Bye-bye.